It's a Thursday on the all-new SportsCage. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Thomas in an unfamiliar spot, sitting in Barney's chair, while Barney is sitting in an unfamiliar spot in a chair in parts unknown. Isn't that what you use in wrestling terms?
You always wanted to cheer for the guy from parts unknown. You are correct, Dave. It's like Bizarro world here, right? Seinfeld, you're there. I'm off on my own home studio.
Well, it's awesome that we're going to bring this show to you, Saskatchewan, because coming up, big news out of Riderville today is Jeremy O'Day met with the media, and one of the points of discussion was quarterback Trevor Harris. We'll bring that to you coming up when we hear from Jeremy O'Day in hour number 2. Also, of course, we've got to go and check in with Glen Suitor. Lots happening in the Canadian Football League, and of course, here in Regina, it's a blockbuster day for the Regina Pats as the Pats traded captain Tanner Howe to the Calgary Hitmen in a blockbuster deal. Is that fair to say, Barney? Would you assess it that way?
Yeah, I think for sure, blockbuster. And I think it came a lot earlier than people were thinking around the league. And then this is the first one now, right? Where do we go from here?
Absolutely, because I think that not a lot of people would have been surprised in that the Pittsburgh Penguins draft pick was traded by the Regina Pats, who were in rebuilding mode. But do you wait? Well, General Manager Alan Millar, we're going to hear from him a little bit later on, and that was one of the questions I asked him. I said, a lot of times you wait until closer to the trade deadline. He says why they did it now and why it was very, very important to accomplish that now. So that's coming up a little bit later on. First, though, let's go out on the Western Pizza Hotline. We are, of course, pleased to be joined by the voice of the Moose Jaw Warriors and get his reaction to this and all things that are happening in Moose Jaw, because maybe this advances the timeline for what the Warriors are going to do moving forward. The Western Pizza Guest Hotline, perfect pizza with a generous amount of toppings, plus great food like souvlaki, ribs, and salads. The goodness you can't make at home. Call Western Pizza today. James Gallo is with us. James, good afternoon, sir. Thanks so much for taking time for us.
Oh, there we go. Afternoon, fellas. How you guys doing today? It's chilly. Hey?
Oh, you want to come shovel my driveway? Find out how cold it really is?
That's why we have kids.
Hey, fellas, I'm going to tell you something weird. James, you've traveled a number of times this way. Dave, I'm in Winnipeg. Show up to Winnipeg. There's no snow here.
No.
I'm thinking, like, I thought that band of snow was coming all the way to, down to the Great Lakes. We have no snow here. Now there's low cloud cover. It looks ominous. Like if I was going golfing today, I'd be packing the rain gear. So maybe we're going to get some. But roads are awful until about Portage La Prairie. If anyone's out there driving, slow and don't go if you don't have to.
Well, okay, let's back up the bus quite literally for a moment, because, James, you've been on those roadies where weather sets in and you've got that bus driver who is doing such a great job in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, doing his thing. Any road trips that you can recall that were a little off the rails, hopefully not off the highway?
I think everybody's got their own experiences. Those guys do a great job, those bus drivers. I had one, I think it might have been my first year, and we were traveling home from Prince George, going to the next destination, and I was the only one awake. I was working on my computer, and you just felt a little, the tail slide just a little bit on those roads, and I'm just gonna put my computer down and go to sleep. Right? I mean, enough's enough. But those guys do a great job. You know what? They full credit to the bus drivers across the Western Hockey League, SJHL, through the winter months. They just do a great job getting teams where they need to be.
Okay, Barney, you were talking about the Tri-City Americans last night, right?
Yeah, James might get a chance to shed some light on this because they were close to his home base. What I heard, James, was they left the game in Swift Current, which would have been Tuesday night, and bus broke down near Chaplin. They couldn't get a new bus. They couldn't get parts, whatever, and they ended up sleeping on the bus. Now, I don't know. That's allegedly, right? I'm going to use the old Monday nooner, allegedly. What did you hear?
Maybe a little bit different in the story, but I would probably say what I heard is not too far off what you heard, Barney.
Okay,
Allegedly.
Before we dive into what is happening, I can give you the proof of the tale of the road trip that isn't alleged. Back in the day, back when I was starting out, back when dinosaurs were still playing, all that stuff, make the old age joke like my kids would do here. The coach for the team, he sat at the front of the butch, and if you got beat, he'd be smoking up the cigarettes, right? So he'd go through a couple of darts before he even left the parking lot. And we're driving through a snowstorm, and the bus driver is looking at him because, of course, he's the head coach, so he's sitting in the front row. He's like, do you see the lines at all? And so he's trying to direct him with the lines. And at one point, he's so mad because the loss was terrible. He's like, yeah, I can see him. And he goes, well, what color it is? And he goes, I don't know, white, yellow, whatever. And so the bus driver starts swerving because he goes, what does it matter? He goes, well, it kind of matters what color the line is. So anyways, we arrived in Kindersley that night and all was well.
Those are on single lane highways probably too, hey? Like that's I'm fortunate enough to be traveling on double the whole way. Don't spend a lot of time on singles. So back those days, Dave, those would have been pretty interesting.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your team and the Moose Jaw Warriors. Of course, you're at home to the Saskatoon Blades tonight. Again, I anticipated, I would suggest, a slower start by the Warriors. 4 wins thus far in the season. Where is this team at where you projected them to be?
Yeah, that's a tough question, I think. It's a team that had 15 guys returning from last year's championship team. You don't lose Matthew Savoy and Atlee Calvert and Jagger Furcus and Denton Matejchuk and not take a step back. But of those 15 guys that are back, you'd have to look at the roster and say, how many of those guys played a lot of minutes last year? And there wasn't a lot. Right, the bulk of those guys, like Lyndon Lakovich, Braden Yager, they sat inside the top 6 last year. But a lot of guys right now are finding their way in the Western Hockey League, and they've got added responsibility, added ice time. I think consistently inconsistent might be the best way to put it. The best stat or that maybe describes the Warriors season is they are tied with the Saskatoon Blades for the most times going into the third period, tied. So 9 times out of 21 games, the Saskatoon Blades and the Moose Jaw Warriors have been tied going into the third period. Here's the difference. The Warriors have a record of 1-6-1-1, and the Blades have a record of 6-3. So the Warriors have done a lot to be in opportunities to win. The tough part is just missing those, as the coaches describe, competitive moments, the moments before the big moments, to try and pick up those big key plays to get the big win.
I ran into General Manager Jason Ripplinger when you guys were out in British Columbia in town, and it seems everybody's going to British Columbia and finding out that things are pretty tough out there this year, James. What was the swing like for you, and is the BC division, pretty deep and for real this year?
The weather was nice. I can start there at some pretty nice locations out in BC. It's tough, right? I think haven't seen all the U.S. division teams yet. The BC division 1 through 5 looks pretty good. There's some pretty competitive teams out there. Some teams with a lot of strengths, some teams with some obvious weaknesses. But right now, that's a hard conference. I think the West, looks pretty loaded. Prince George, I think, is ready to make that push. It's probably the peak of their cycle with Cohen Zemer graduating after this year. Riley Height probably headed to the pros. Boria Vallis headed to the pros after this year. Everett, boy, they're good. That's probably the fastest team that I've seen. The Vancouver Giants, don't sleep on them. Probably the second fastest team that I've seen, the way they play. Connor Schmidt's the real deal. Cameron Schmidt for the Vancouver Giants. Cameron Schmidt, fast, and boy, can he shoot. There's some really good teams out west. And then, as you approach kind of that trade deadline, what did the Kelowna Rockets do? Sitting on guys like Tisha Ginla, Andrew Crystal, Caden Price. They got some really good players there. Does Bruce Hamilton want to load up? But, of course, I think a lot is probably tied up to that Memorial Cup decision, which I don't know when it's coming. But, the Kelowna Rockets are one of 5 teams trying to get the Memorial Cup next year. And that may change Bruce's perspective, but that's another great team to watch.
Interesting that you mentioned the Memorial Cup. Going to get into that question in just a moment. Of course, James Gallo joins us on the Western Pizza guest hotline. It's the all-new Sports Cage. We're streaming live at sportscage.com. Of course, you can hit us up on YouTube. Click like and subscribe. You can chime in with your comments. The Capital Ford Lincoln text line is always open as well at 306-936-6262. You've been in the Memorial Cup tournament last season with the Moose Jaw Warriors. Other leagues do it differently when it comes to bidding for the event, in that you have to be in a certain position in the standings to have the ability to bid for that tournament and that event, which seems natural to me, or am I wrong in that?
You never know, right? Because to me, it seems like I would view, like here in the Western Hockey League, they want to look at how you sit business-wise and how you sit hockey-wise. And I think, how teams vote, because it's voted by all 60 teams now, not just inside the league. How teams vote is their prerogative and what they put above each other. It's where you are in your cycle, right? I mean, look at the Medicine Hat Tigers. They're really good this year, but still could peak next year with Gavin McKenna, the expected first overall pick in next year's NHL entry draft. He's got the late birthday, so not eligible this year. The Brandon Wee Kings, they're pretty young, so I think it's tough for them in that regards on the hockey side. Kelowna, as I mentioned, we'll see what happens there. Spokane with Berkeley Catton, Saskatchewan product next year. Seattle Kraken picks. So. And the Lethbridge Hurricanes, I think, have a lot of guys back next year that could really make an impact. So you can get yourself really fast, really good too in today's day and age. You got to pay for it a little bit, obviously, but I don't mind it. I mean, it's tried and true here in the Western Hockey League, but those host teams are always a little different. I think you got to look at that way as well. No host team likes taking the back door in, and they load up to try and go through the front door, which I think is great.
You mentioned Berkeley Catton. We got Riley Height in Prince George. You got Caden Price in Kelowna. You got Braden Yeager. All those guys are intertwined, playing in the Saskatoon minor hockey system. A lot of people are talking Yeager is going to fetch a healthy price tag if he gets moved. Could you see any of that playing into it, James, where, and I know, we call it in the NHL, guys can, with no trade clauses and whatnot, they can say junior hockey is a little bit different. But would you ever see, and have he ever heard in the past where a kid will say, hey, I'd like to go play with my buddy one more time if there's anything you can do there?
I don't know. I can't speak to the Braden Yeager situation. That's in the mind of Jason Ripplinger, our general manager. But maybe. Right? There's probably cases where guys would say, I'm playing in this place. I'd rather be, at home or as close to home, or, I've got a lot of buddies that are with this team. I'd like to go there. But, the one thing you got to think, Barney, too, is with these elite guys, look at Matthew Savoy last year. Matthew Savoy knew Braden Yeager, knew Denton Matejchuk, knew Jagger Furcus, and knew pretty well half of the Moose Jaw Warriors team. Why? Because they all know each other. They all know each other, right? I mean, it doesn't matter where you're from. Your paths cross at some point. So most guys have a number of really good friends on each team. So I really don't think that really comes into a play that much.
Before I give you a moment to marinate on the thought of some of the greatest trades of all time, I'm giving you, this is your 3-minute warning, so to speak, but if for folks that may have missed it, Tanner Howe was traded. The captain of the Regina Pats was dealt to the Calgary Hitmen. The way that the deal was done is that it was agreed upon by both teams at 6:35 last night. So just before the Pats were heading out onto the ice for their pregame skate, at which point Tanner Howe was notified that he was going to be traded and was pulled off the ice. It was a very emotional moment. You'll hear this conversation that occurred between player and coach coming up with the general manager of the Regina Pats, coming up with Alan Millar in just a few moments' time. But the timing of this, some would say that, if you waited until January, when that trade deadline is approaching, maybe you can go ahead and get more teams bidding against one another, which would maybe maximize your return. However, I point to last season where the Saskatoon Blades were very proactive and went and acquired Fraser Minton at this time last year before the World Junior Camp so that they could have him in town to learn their systems before he headed out. So the timing of this one isn't really related to that, but it kind of is. Do you think that this, though, adjusts any timelines that there might be for the Moose Jaw Warriors to decide what they're going to do with a player the likes of Yeager, or what they might do with their roster shaping it forward?
I think that's a really good question. I think, every general manager, when it comes to dealing, they're hard. Trades are hard to accomplish. B, we have to adhere to the WHL trade deadline, which is kind of mid-January. But then I think general managers will put their own deadlines in, right? Like look at Curtis Hunt, who general manager of the Prince Albert Raiders, had Caden Gooley one year, had Nolan Allen the next. And, again, I've never talked to Curtis about this, but maybe Curtis said, this is my deadline. If you are interested in one of these guys, I want it done by this day because I want my assets back over the World Junior time. Right. But then there's some guys that maybe feel a little bit more comfortable that, hey, maybe my guy can go look at, the Wenatchee Wild last year. Maybe their timeline was the January 10th deadline because they felt that having Connor Geekie and Matthew Savoy play in the World Juniors might enhance their value. So I think it's case to case. It's whatever general manager prefers. In our case, Jason Ripplinger, when he took over the team in 2020, he had a plan and he had a vision, and he didn't deter from that. I think he had chances to, but he stuck with his plan, and his plan ended with a Western Hockey League championship. So whatever Jason's plan is moving forward, I think it's just a matter of trusting his plan. And I think you guys would agree too that every general manager, when he takes over a team, he'll say, I have a 3-year plan or I have a 5-year plan. Sometimes when they deviate is when things necessarily go wrong. I think sometimes you're forced to deviate because things are going really well. For Jason, in his 4 years since he took over in 2020, he did not deviate, right? You think about 2 years ago, the last year that Ryder Korzak was with the Warriors as a 20-year-old. They lost to Winnipeg in the second round. Great series. Could Jason have used assets that year to improve his team, to maybe make that push to try and, potentially knock off Winnipeg and then maybe a Kamloops or Seattle? Maybe. His plan was to load up for the following year, which was last year. So you stick with your plan and you go with it. It's the same thing with what you have, whether you're acquiring players or whether you're trading players. General managers will have their deadline in their mind because that's their plan. And a general manager, for all we know, the Calgary Hitmen might have said, we want this trade done before the World Juniors because we want to, if Tanner Howe has the potential to go to a World Junior camp, maybe make Team Canada, we want some games to get him acclimated into our system. I don't know, but maybe that's the case. So every guy's different, but you got to find a dancing partner. And, for the Pats and the Hitmen, that's just twice that they found, the right moves and they fit in.
I would love to be a fly on the wall in a lot of this. And it's a lot like buying stock or property. And when do you sell, right? Okay, do we hang on? Do we sell? It's very similar. James, question to you. I've asked some of the other guys around the league this in the last week. Where do you think, and then Dave, you've been around too, and you'll remember the Braden Shen trade. Where do you think things in the Western Hockey League really took off as far as capital being exchanged? Was it, we didn't see a lot of 2 first-rounders. I think the Cale Clegg maybe comes to mind in that, Gooley, like you said. The Western Hockey League always seemed to be a little bit behind. We saw the Tavares trade in Ontario. We saw even Lindros, right? We go back. Which one in the WHL do you feel really pre-Zellweger took it to another level?
I think you're right, Barney. I think the Western Hockey League has always been very conservative. The abnormal trades were the Braden Shen and Cody Eakin deals, where there was a lot of picks and or prospects involved. I think but back then it's different because, in that era, you could trade import picks. You could trade 16-year-olds. You could trade, 15-year-olds. Yeah. That is not the case now. If I had to pinpoint a time, I would look to the 17-18 season. It was an arms race between, the Regina Pats, who were hosting the Memorial Cup, the Moose Jaw Warriors and the Swift Current Broncos. And I would look to the first trade that kind of kicked it all off was when the Broncos, they acquired Beck Mallenstein and, the name, I apologize, but it was Beck Mallenstein, another player from the Calgary Hitmen. And it was Riley Stotts was the big prospect going back to the Calgary Hitmen in that trade. And that one was a big trade. It was massive. We were talking multiple firsts, multiple prospects, and it was just huge. And from then on out, when guys had players, then you had like the Jake Bean trade, you had the Cale Clegg trade that year, the Tanner Kaspick trade was that year. And since then, the prices have just stayed in that line. And I think it's tough for general managers because their tradable assets are not as much as what fans think that they have, right? There's not as much tradable assets as what fans think that they have. And when you're talking about moving a 17-year-old like Reese Hamilton, he's got to waive his no trade. He's an elite prospect, right, as well. You got to consider that. There's a lot of things that go into completing a trade like that Tanner Howe trade.
Well, we're going to go ahead and get to trades, I promise, in just a moment, but should introduce the gang. Barney is hanging out in a closet in Winnipeg, and we got James Gallo, the voice of the Moose Jaw Warriors. The double C's and Alan are on the other side of the cameras today on the all-new SportsCage, streaming at sportscage.com. So one thing that you mentioned was the impact that those trades out east have, and I'll get both of your thoughts on this. And again, Barney, you've got a youngster, players that have gone on to play elite levels, and the Bantam draft is such a consideration right now. But if you're talking about the OHL or the Q, it wasn't a Bantam draft that they held, right? It was basically a prospect that you could draft the following year. So when you're trading a first-round pick, you're likely trading a pick for a player that's going to be in that team's lineup the following year. So as a fan, is it easier to digest me knowing that, hey, I have just traded one of my elite players, understanding that my team needs to gain some assets moving forward, and knowing that I don't have to wait 2 years to see him play for my team, but I might be able to see him next year? Does that change the thinking as far as the fans, or should it?
I guess this is the culture that we're used to in the Western Hockey League, holding their draft at the age that they have it. I think, again, sorry to sound repetitive, but it's tried and true. And, in the OHL, you can't trade first round picks, right? So teams are protected. They're protected that way. I believe it's the same in the Q. In the Western Hockey League, you cannot trade signed 15 or 16-year-old players. They are off the board. And in the past, those guys were always on the board. For me, I like the draft age where it is. I can compare it a little bit to the National Hockey League in a sense of, the Moose Jaw Warriors draft Braden Yager in 2020. He signs. He's now under their umbrella, right? There's opportunities. Each team is different, but the Moose Jaw Warriors have, players drafted in May. The Warriors will have a development camp in May. They'll have the player in likely over Christmas time if they're not at the max. Then they have they'll have a training camp in the fall. And then you have a development camp again in May. And then you have another training camp. So before that player can actually play for your team, he will have been seen by the coaches 5 times. And it's 5 times, and it's probably a year and a half where the team should have and potentially could have an impact on that player's development, calling them up and down, just getting them around the room. The Warriors have 3 prospects that are just across the hallway from them right now, and that helps. And that to me is why I like it the way it is. So that young player at 15 has basically a year to see what the culture is like and to try and meet players and get involved in the organization instead of just opening the doors on day one and say, here I am, love me or hate me.
Yeah, I agree. I like that too. Just kind of in the scope where I am and seeing these youngsters, right? Like we're starting a Bantam AAA tournament tonight. And there are so many kids in that hockey rink for the next 4 days that will get drafted with some of the picks that we've seen over the last 2 years. There's no doubt about it. The other thing that I started thinking about yesterday was I wonder the trades in the Western Hockey League, maybe down the road, maybe not this year, on how much the NCAA transfer is going to play into a lot of things and how much due diligence you're going to have to do to find out, okay, how long do we have this kid? Like, how much do we know? It's almost like, CSI. You're going to have to go deep on it because the rumor that's floating around on a number of places is the possibility of Gavin McKenna next year going to play NCAA because because there's just nothing more for him to do in the Western Hockey League. And I'm like, well, that's a low schedule. The NHL teams like the Western League guys. They're tried and tested. I'm just curious on this NCAA thing too, and the scouting that's going to have to go into things at all ages. I feel is going to be interesting over the next few years.
Okay, we are going to hear from General Manager Alan Millar of your Regina Pats in a moment. James Gallo from the Moose Jaw Warriors before we let you go. Best trade all time, any sport you can pick and show your allegiance because it was great for your team or terrible for your team. If you had to pick a trade that goes down as the best of all time, what are you going to say?
Are you saying best trade or most memorable trade?
See, it's two different things. It's your definition. It's your game here, man. Best, whatever you want. Best is best.
You know what? I'm not gonna say this is. There's been a lot of trades that I've seen and I've had conversations. I think like the Nikita Papagayev trade to Prince George for Justin Almeida was a great trade. Alan Millar made that one. I think the Matthew Savoy trade by Jason Ripplinger last year was absolutely fantastic to get a player like that without having to utilize any young talent. But for me, the most memorable trade for me is a Moose Jaw Warrior trade made many moons ago, and it was one where it involved Brooks Lake and Thomas Mojes going to the Seattle Thunderbirds, and the return was Craig Olynyk, who was a nice guy to deal with. Don't get me wrong, enjoyed being with him. And I'm not picking on Craig at all. But the trade I think was in like in October, November. He didn't score his first goal until February with the Warriors, and then there was a highly touted import player from Russia, Stanislav Oksentiev. I'll never forget the name. He never came. I don't think he touched Canadian soil. Right, so that's a hard trade. It's one that always stands out in my mind because Mojes and Lake were two World Junior players, and that's a tough pill to swallow.
Moose Jaw Warriors Saskatoon Blades coming up at the Moose Jaw Event Center. Quickly set it up for me. Going to be a good one, right?
Should be fun. Always is. It's a nice rivalry between these two teams. And just a heads up as well, guys, Warriors Hall of Fame is tomorrow night, Friday. Dustin Boyd and Jody Lehman in the players category, and the Moose Jaw Multiplex Builders, who raised $10 million to build our brand new home, all being inducted into our Hall of Fame tomorrow.
Sensational stuff. James, thanks so much. Have a great call tonight. I owe you one.
Anytime, guys. Anytime. Have a nice day.
James Gallo, voice of the Moose Jaw Warriors here on the all-new Sports Cage. Okay, as promised, we will get to the general manager of your Regina Pats. And as James kind of alluded to it, Barney, he said that there was a deadline in place to trade Tanner Howe, but the deadline wasn't set by the Regina Pats. We'll hear that conversation coming up next. It's the all-new Sports Cage, streaming at sportscage.com or on the all-new 620 CKRM. Dave Thomas in our Rose Street studios, downtown Regina. I like what you've done with the place, Barney. See the Christmas decorations ready to go up. That's terrific.
Here or yours?
Oh, here. Isn't that what you've got under this cabinet over here? I don't know. I was looking for something else.
I still have a bunch of poppies. There's a pumpkin there from Halloween. I'm that guy.
There was a mint here earlier. I don't know where that went.
Yeah, that's mine. I only eat half of a mint, and then I eat the other half later.
Wow. A lot to unpack today.
You gotta be careful what rabbit hole you want to go down.
It's the all-new Sports Cage, streaming at sportscage.com. Of course, you can find us on our YouTube channel as well. Big day today for the Regina Pats. Speaking of trades, as they trade their captain, Tanner Howe, he'll go down the road and head to Calgary, and the Calgary Hitmen coming back the other way. A couple of players in Reese Hamilton, Keats Fawcett, as well as 2 draft picks. The trade was consummated late last night, approved by the league later today, hence the delay in the news being broken, if you will, from the Regina Pats. The Vice President of Hockey Operations and General Manager Alan Millar met with the media earlier today, and before he wanted to discuss the trade, he wanted to make sure that everyone knew the impact that Tanner Howe, the outgoing captain, had on this organization.
Most important thing for me to say to start this off this morning is to thank Tanner Howe. And obviously it's, as I mentioned in the release, it's an important move for our franchise, but very difficult when you're dealing with a very good player, but a quality person in Tanner, our captain. My relationship with Tanner goes back to him playing under-18 Worlds as an underage, and I have tremendous respect for him. How he prepares, how he leads. I think the world of Tanner Howe as a young man, and I thank him for his time with our hockey club. Wish him the best in Calgary, wish him the best beyond with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I can't say enough about him.
So when dealing a captain and you're throwing in multiple players and multiple picks, how long does it take to come together on a deal like this?
It came together fairly quickly. I think we started talking about Reese Hamilton late last week with Calgary. It culminated in some different discussions. We had conversations with Calgary yesterday that indicated that Hamilton was going to be moved yesterday. They had a priority on the deal we were talking about, but had made it clear to us that if we decided to pass or move on, that he was going to be moved in another deal. We collectively as a group, talked, evaluated the trade, continued to do our homework and research, and we had a deadline with Calgary at about 6:15, 6:30 last night, or they were going to move on, and we decided to move forward. We just felt that, I'll start with the draft capital, continue to add valuable draft capital to what we're trying to build here. I think Dante states it in the release. We now have 15 picks in the first 3 rounds of the next 3 drafts. That includes 5 first-round picks, 6 second-round picks, and 5 third-round picks. That's going to give us, great flexibility and great options. When we got to a point where a player like Keith Fawcett was in the deal as an 18-year-old, had a great rookie season, set 19 goals last year, plays the game hard, skates well, softens the blow on taking Tanner Howe out of our lineup and, keeps us somewhat competitive this year. And then, when it came to Hamilton, 4th overall pick in the Bantam draft, played, was with the under-18 team in April at World Championships to get that experience, won gold on the Hlinka team, highly rated for the NHL draft, playing in next week's CHL USA Top Prospects game. Players like that don't usually come on the market at 17 years of age, and we just felt with what we're doing here and the fit in terms of our blue line moving forward, that we had to move forward and capitalize on the offer that was made and the situation with Hamilton being part of it.
And with that timeline regarding Hamilton, you would have to expect then that obviously it speaks to the quality of player that is coming this way for the Pats.
It really boiled down exactly to what you said, is that we collectively made a decision to entertain moving Tanner Howe before the World Junior Selection Camp. I feel comfortable in saying that I believe Tanner will be invited to that camp, and I think he has a real good chance to play on that team. So in essence, for our hockey club, if Tanner played on the World Junior team, and we were going to move him, he wouldn't play another game for us after he left for World Juniors. So we talked about the strategy around adding the assets that potentially could come from a Howe trade, get them in our lineup earlier, and having those assets to help us prepare for our deadline without concentrating on Howe and the fact that he wasn't going to play another game for us could be valuable. So a little bit of a long-winded, but in terms of coming around to that, but it really boiled down to the fact that yesterday we had a deal on the table that we really liked collectively with the draft and the players, and essentially we had to make a decision if we wanted to move forward. If we didn't move forward yesterday, then Reese Hamilton wouldn't have been part of a future deal.
Reese Hamilton, Keats Fawcett, both expected in the lineup when the Regina Pats play in Swift Current. So General Manager Alan Millar was asked what was their response and reaction to moving to the rebuilding Regina Pats in what is a bit of a homecoming for one of those players.
Their response has been great. They're very excited. Reese has a history with a lot of people in our organization. Tristan Fry through spring hockey, Dale Durkach, playing with Dale's son Dace. We know Reese and his family very, very well. Obviously he's been around the Hockey Canada people for a while. Got great information from them. Lots of good things there and a homecoming for him. He's really excited. And I think Keats Fawcett, similar. He's an Alberta kid. Obviously had a great 17-year-old year. Not got off to the start maybe as expected based on what he accomplished a year ago. But seems like a guy that's really excited, and talking to him and his agent last night, really excited for a fresh start and getting to Regina and being around our group.
So Barney, your reaction, is it one of surprise? Is it one of non-surprise? What's the immediate take when you hear that the captain of the Regina Pats has been dealt to the Calgary Hitmen?
I got a chance to talk to Tanner a number of times over the last year. Mutual friends of parents in Prince Albert as well. Great kid, like Alan said. And I know it's always said when kids get traded or when players get traded. I was surprised it happened this early. But when Alan breaks down, how everything was going to go down, and then it starts to make sense. Alan Millar's probably one of the smartest GMs in the Western Hockey League now. I think this is a fantastic move for the franchise going forward. It's a fantastic move for Tanner, although he was pretty beat up in leaving. With the start there, we all hope he gets that chance with the World Junior team after what happened at the summer camp early against Sweden. Puck in the face, had to come home. And I think Pete Anholt's going to give him that shot. Being a Sask, both being from Saskatchewan, Pete loving his Saskatchewan players, and just knowing the circumstance that he was in. So again, long-winded there, but I was surprised it happened when it did. The other really interesting thing here, Dave, and people know how important that Bantam draft is and how important the first round of the Bantam draft was. And I don't think it's every year it seems to be more important. There was back in our day, the Bantam draft when it was in its first few seasons, there was kids taken in that first round, never played. Now it's so important. So what Regina Pat fans need to remember here is if you can ever get 2 high picks in a Bantam draft, that is a steal. And now what the Pats have is they have the 4th pick in the 2022 Bantam draft in Reese Hamilton, and they have the 5th pick in Cole Temple. So they have the 4 and 5 pick in their stable, which is, if you said to someone, we're going to trade you the 4 and 5 pick for the Bantam draft this year or next year, that would be off the charts. So again, Alan Millar is so smart in what he does. This team is set up really well for the next few seasons.
Okay, we're going to get to the most memorable trade or the best trade that you have or can recall. There's some dandies in there. Like, you remember you used to get the old hockey Bible back in the day where it listed every player and everybody's stats, but the best part was you could track their moves. So you could see, this player was traded to a Quebec Nordiques for a bag of pucks, right? You used to be able to track those trades so easily, and it's still there, but we'll track some trades coming up as well. Go ahead.
The other thing that I was going to say is remember when we used to be hockey card collectors or even hockey sticker books?
Yeah.
And if a guy was traded before or after some things went to print, they would basically superimpose or draw just some random jersey. It was like a beer league jersey on Bernie Nichols or whatever, right? Those are good. There's one that whenever we get to it in the show, there's one trade, and I'm not going to say it's my favorite trade of all time. It was just one that still floors me. That happened. There's my tease.
All right, that's coming up. Plus a guy who's going to have to make a trade, and he knows it. That's coming up for you next on the all-new Sports Cage, streaming at sportscage.com and live on 620 CKRM. Well, the Regina Pats have traded away Tanner Howe to the Calgary Hitmen. That's the big headline of the day. Coming up, we are going to hear from General Manager and Vice President of Football Operations of your Saskatchewan Roughriders, Jeremy O'Day. He'll break down the season that was and talk about the quarterback. We'll get to that coming up in a little bit. But speaking of general managers in the CFL and trades, the new general manager of the BC Lions is Ryan Rigmaiden, and he's on record already saying that we are going to be trading Vernon Adams Jr.
We're going to do what's best for the club. I talk to VA all the time. I put him on the neg list when he was 19 years old. I love VA. I've got a lot of background with him. So we're going to keep in communication with him. Matter of fact, I talked to him before a couple hours ago. He will not have a say in this process. We're going to do what's best for the club. We're going to keep in constant communication with him.
So that's the future of Vernon Adams Jr. going forward in BC. Basically, it's wait and see time as I'm taking and making all kinds of calls that I can, one of which has not been made to the Saskatchewan Roughriders, by the way. But, Barney, you teased the ultimate trade. I can't wait anymore. Ultimate best trade of all time.
No. Well, you prefaced it earlier with, I think, trade that I remember.
Yeah.
That stands out for me. And it's funny. It's February 27th, 1996. February 27th, 1996. St. Louis Blues acquire Wayne Gretzky from the Los Angeles Kings. They sent a 5th round pick in 96, a 1st round pick in 97, Craig Johnson, Patrice Tardif, and Roman Vopat to the Kings. And it just, like, we all remember the Gretzky that are in our demographic. Curtis and Colson won't, but our demographic, where Gretzky went to the Kings. But Gretzky to the Blues is so forgotten. And then the Blues had a legit shot to get to the Stanley Cup until Nick Kyprios falls into Grant Fuhr. So it's just one of those ones, Dave, and there's been some good football ones, baseball, basketball. I remember the Shaquille O'Neal one. I was never a big basketball guy, but I remember the Shaquille O'Neal trade. But that Gretzky to the Blues always just stands out to me for some weird reason.
See, I don't know whether or not to be bitter about the whole Eric Lindros trade back in the day or the best rider trade of all time. Wouldn't you have to say the acquisition of Darian Durant, or are you going to say Ronnie Lancaster?
No, Durant, because that's more my demo hit home, right? The CFL ones are tricky, because I think when I go back, I was so clueless. Like I was just so clueless on how everything worked, and you just wanted to be a fan and all that. And then I guess same with hockey, but when one of, or the greatest player of all times, puts on this obscure jersey of the St. Louis Blues, and then you kind of go back, and I'm like, yeah, that threw me for a loop.
For a 5th round pick.
Well, there was a couple others, but yeah, Patrice Tardif. Like, what's Patrice Tardif doing right now? He might be in this hotel. He might have been the guy that checked me in here in Winnipeg.
Okay, we need to take a break. Coming up, we've got the general manager and vice president of football operations for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, Jeremy O'Day, coming up after the news. It's the all-new SportsCage, streaming at sportscage.com and on 620 CKRM. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is a Thursday, the 21st day of November. Stay safe on the road. Still icy, slippery sections being reported around the province. Some drifting snow as well a little bit, and it looks like we're in for more snow on the weekend. So, yay, that's really cool. I'm Dave Thomas in for Barney Shynkaruk. Barney's on the road. It seems like we just can't be in the same room at the same time. People are going to start to get the wrong idea, Barney.
There we go. Yeah, you know what, though? I appreciate you being able to be there today. Because with kids, and you understand, right? Things are going 1,000 different directions. That we're able to pull this off, and you were able to have a busy day, but an exciting day because it was also Jeremy O'Day's day with the Riders as well.
Absolutely. We're going to hear from the general manager and vice president of football operations in just one moment. But speaking of hockey parents, you've obviously seen the meme out there, right? Whereas there's the guy sitting behind the wheel of a half-ton, right? And it says storm warnings on the radio, and he's sitting there and is like, well, we got to get to hockey in 90 minutes, though. We'll be there. Heck with the road closed.
Yeah, no. For sure. And everybody that was driving, I know there's a Moose Jaw team, there's our Regina team, there's a Southeast, so the Yorkton all the way down. All those people were traveling to Winnipeg for the start of the tournament today, and the roads were treacherous. So I just hope everybody's driving safe. It's crazy out there. Dave, you know what we did when we got here today? I wanted to ask you this one. Is just happened to be former Regina Pat employee Daniel Fink, now works for True North Entertainment and the Manitoba Moose. It just happened the Manitoba Moose were playing the Chicago Wolves at 10:30 this morning at the MTS Center in a school game. 5,000 kids. We've seen it before. We don't see that much anymore, though, in the WHL, do we?
No, it kind of went away with COVID, I think, because before 2020, the Saskatoon Blades annually did one, and it was terrific. Fill the stands up with kids. If you're a kid, what's better? You're going to a hockey game for a field trip.
Yeah, and it was pretty electric in there. I thought about a few things, and my son Roman was asking me questions like, well, where did these guys play last night? And then so I started looking through the schedules, and there wasn't a game last night because 10:30 puck drop is a massive time change for these professional athletes. And I haven't seen an AHL game in a long time. I'm trying to think how many years. It was great hockey. It was fast. There was skill. There were so many big hits. There were 3 where the trainer had to come on the ice. It was really interesting. It was very, very well put together by the Manitoba Moose. 5,000 kids. That rink's amazing in Winnipeg here. And so we got to kill a few hours doing that. And again, thanks to Daniel Fink from the Manitoba Moose for hooking me up, because I would have had no idea that was going on. And it would be nice to see it happen a little bit more. I get, though, the logistics of it. There was a lot of teachers. Being with my wife being in the education system, a lot of teachers were doing chasing. I think you'd have to go with the select group of kids that aren't going to run out right into the middle of the street or anything. But kudos to those teachers for doing a heck of a job. And it was just it was well put together.
See, and bringing it full circle, field trip back in my day in Weyburn again. We didn't get a chance to go to big fancy hockey games in the middle of the day. A field trip, we literally went and saw barley. Like, we went to a farmer's field in Weyburn.
Yeah, but if I know you small town kids, you guys were introduced to barley at a young age, if you know what I mean, compared to us city kids. You know what the big ones were in Saskatoon at King George Elementary School for me? The big field trip every year was Beaver Creek.
Yeah.
And the other one was Batoche. And the story about Batoche is they only had outhouses there. And one time a young Barney had to go and there was no toilet paper.
Wow. There's an education.
That's what I remember about Batoche. I'll always remember Batoche.
And Batoche will always remember you. We were talking about the weather, and the Dominican Republic is playing a game up in Saskatoon tonight on the hardwood. We're going to tell you about that coming up in a bit. But first, let's, without further ado, get to Vice President of Football Operations, General Manager Jeremy O'Day. Had an opportunity to have a discussion with him to follow up on the season that ended in the West Final for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, but they did host a home playoff game. So first and foremost, we asked J.O. to assess what he's learned about his team and the group that he's got here moving forward in the season that was.
Obviously there's one goal when you go into every season, it's to win a championship. So when you don't reach that goal, it's disappointing, and that's what you're ultimately trying to accomplish. And getting closer to it is maybe even more challenging with getting that close and not getting to the final game and playing it. But I thought we took a lot of positive steps as a football team for sure. Some of the plans that we had going into, some of the things that we wanted to accomplish and improve on going into the season, I thought that we were successful in doing that. Every football season is going to be different. It's kind of like a book, and there's going to be all sorts of different chapters. Maybe those are just the week in, week out games. It's never going it's never going to look exactly how you want it to look. There's ups and downs through the season, but it's a long season, so you'll have all sorts of things that you're going throughout the year. But we had our challenges. Personally, our players had a lot of challenges in their personal lives that a lot of people don't know that they had to go through, and those are things that happen throughout the year that outsiders don't see. But I thought that they really came together as a group, as a team. They were closer than many teams that I've seen in the past, and just really had each other's back, cared about each other. A lot of that had to do with our head coach and his staff, just their messaging. Those guys see the players every single day, have to be a voice in their rooms every single day, and I just thought they did a tremendous job. So just like most years, you have your ups and downs. To be honest, I was surprised that we started so fast. When you have a new staff, new schemes, new coaches, it's hard in a short training camp to get to a point where you're going to go out and win football games early, and so that was a pleasant surprise. Obviously, that's the plan, is to win the football games, but I felt like we did it very quickly, and it's a credit to the coaches and the work they put into the off season and also in training camp, and the players for their buy-in. And then we went through a lull, and those are tough. And for me personally, I want to be real careful not to lump this season with the past 2 seasons, because I don't think it's fair to the coaching staff, the players. It's a completely different team, completely different staff. So some of the things we accomplished this year were impressive. A first-year head coach, first-year coordinator. That's an impressive feat when you're going against teams that have veteran coaches and they've been around for a while. So really proud of that. Really proud. Corey's everything that we hoped he would be. The message, the love for his players, the love the players have for him. It's really genuine. The players care about him. He cares about them, which is great. And they just kept fighting. And I felt that it was different, me personally, than the years before, just from the fact of just kind of how close we were in those games. A play here and there, and I think they would have turned out differently, which in the end kind of came out to be big games. When you're going through the early games, that they all count at the end. And so if we had a game or two that would have went differently, we would have been in a different spot in the playoffs. But we're close. Happy that we got the home playoff game. We feel like the more home playoff games, the more chances you have to be successful and win Grey Cups. So happy to have that home game. It wasn't the goal that we were after, but it was a step within that grand plan of winning a championship that we wanted to get. And was happy that we got in front of our home fans and won that game. But ultimately, we came up short, and we're going to use it as a building block. Truly feel like this is an ascending team. I feel like we have young players that are becoming really good players. I feel like we've done a decent job with putting ourselves in position going into the off season. Feel like there's some momentum there, and our players are excited about 2025.
How do you take that next step forward as an organization?
That's what we're going through now. I mean, there's a whole process once the year ends of how we evaluate. We're evaluating all the players currently and going through the roster, how they fit in. This is Corey's first time being in our building, so everything was new for him, and he saw how everything operates. And obviously we made changes to our roster going into the year. There was certain things that we wanted to improve on, and certain parts of a football team that we feel is important. We want to protect the quarterback. We want to get after the quarterback. We want to create turnovers, and those are some of the critical things that are important to be successful winning football games. So I think it was a really good start for Corey and his staff. I'm really super excited to spend a full off season with those guys and start this process of next year. But it's not something you can just throw out a culture word and it just happens. You have to live it every day. And when Corey came into our organization, we echoed that thought through everyone, not just our players, not just our coaches, but to our staff, about how we want to be together and work together and stay positive and work through the tough times. And I think he's done a great job of that. And for some reason, everyone likes him, so that's a good thing. but it's a pleasure to be around Corey and his staff. I can't speak enough about the staff and the job that they did. If you look at the job Mark did on offense and in particular, he had a revolving door there with the injuries we had on offense. And I think I said earlier it wasn't just one position. We were hit hard on the offensive line, which seems like it's been happening for the last number of years. But it also happened at receiver and quarterback and running back. So, for a first-year coordinator to have to go through that and move guys in and out of the lineup and also get those guys prepared to win football games, it was impressive with what he was able to do. So, the idea is you want to have continuity in your roster and you want to have guys that have played next to each other for a while. Unfortunately, for most of the year, we were kind of running through guys there on offense, but a credit to those guys. Also, credit to our scouting department for the job they did bringing in players.
So, Jeremy O'Day, you mentioned that decisions have to be made moving forward. On behalf of Rider Nation, has a decision been made on your quarterback, Trevor Harris?
No, it's early, so we just started the evaluation process. So our year ended, then we went to Grey Cup, and then the coaches turned their evaluations, and like we do every year, and then we have those discussions that are happening this week. So we haven't made a decision on any of the players yet, as far as who's coming back, who we want back. Doesn't mean that we do want them back or we don't want them back. But I will say that Trevor's everything that you see on a regular basis when he speaks. When he's in the huddle, when he's in the locker room, when he's home with his family, he's a true leader. We can't put there's not enough weight that we can put on what he does for the organization. And someone that came here only 2 years ago, the impact that he has on the younger players, his work ethic, his preparation that most people wouldn't see, the amount of time that he spends communicating with Mark, tremendous person. Thought it was just awesome how he persevered going through an injury this year, coming back, playing at that level after coming back from an injury is very impressive. To be a division all-star after missing 6 games is quite impressive, especially in the quarterback position. So we love Trevor. And those are obviously discussions that we'll have moving forward, but nothing to report right now.
General Manager and Vice President of Football Operations, Jeremy O'Day, assessing the 2024 season and looking ahead to 2025. Not going to rest on his laurels.
I always go back, Dave, to putting myself in his shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The last few years, we've all been through, whether you've worked in different businesses and jobs as a kid and growing up as an adult and all that. And then you always go back and you appreciate those managers, right? What they had to put up with and the different things. And you go, wow, man, were we hard on him or what? And I feel a lot of times that's Rider Nation. And we see it on the text line doing the show all the time. It doesn't matter when. He is in such a tough spot. And it's the old damned if you do, damned if you don't on a lot of things. Where we are right now as an organization, as Rider Nation, how can't you be happy? And I know you can always nitpick. You can always go to this or why aren't we doing this and all this. He seems true to his word and his conviction.
The one thing that stood out for me, and maybe I was too close to the situation to fully grasp, but the job that Mark Millar did this year, think about it. So we all know about the offensive line, right? When you're going through double-digit starting offensive linemen, that's a chore, right? But he didn't have A.J. Ouellette for most of the season. The receivers that started every game for him this season include Samuel Emilus, except that he didn't play the final game of the regular season. Jarreth Stern, Sean Bain Jr., Kean Schaefer-Baker, Keyshawn Johnson, Dante Myers, all missed time as running backs, and not to mention he missed his starting quarterback for a third of the season. What a job he did, and it flew completely under the radar.
Yeah. Edwin Harrison.
Yeah.
Right? Like, It is, and I think that's to me. I think that's the cool balance that we have, and when we get to talk throughout the season, and you come on the show, a few times a week, is because you're so close to the team, and you're there every day, and you're traveling, and you get to see, and then it's almost like when my other job is in marketing and sales and helping business market and sales. It's almost like sometimes you need to step back from your business and look at it as a consumer, look at it from the outside. And that's where, I feel that, whether it's Colson or Curtis or Don Hewitt when he's on or whatever, when we're on the sports cage, we're kind of seeing it from a different side. And we are seeing the people text in and what Rider Nation's thinking and then what we're thinking as well. I love that balance, but at the end of the day, I don't know how you can't be positive about things, where he's at, and he knows. He has a good idea what Trevor Harris is thinking, what way more than any of us do. And the hire of Corey Mace, do we have to look any further to, a solid hire than what he's constructed there? It's I like it, and I'm so looking forward to next year.
There's a lot of jobs that I wouldn't want to have. Like, during the snowstorm, being the guy that would have to, go and shovel the walk, stuff like that. I don't know that I would want Jeremy O'Day's job because the amount of data that him and the coaches, as far as analytics go, would be presented with, as far as, just the gut feel, the projection of where you see a player projecting to in their future and how you see them develop. I don't know that would be a fun job in football or any other job. A, when you're assessing what you have. B, trying to anticipate what might be out there. And again, I can tell you I'm no good at it. Look at my fantasy football team. I'm terrible. Like, it's awful.
It's so funny you say that because, I've coached football. I've coached hockey. And then when you get to that professional level, you think of the amount of time. I'm gonna throw out a name here in Regina, Jason Jansen, that's coached my son in football, and all the minor football coaches, the amount of time, and then there's even data at that level, and then and then you think about what they're doing at the professional level, or Coach McConkey and his staff at the U of R, the amount of work that is going into this, and then we sit back and, like you said, I don't play fantasy football, but everyone else does. And we sit and think, well, why aren't we doing this? And why aren't we doing this? And why aren't we doing this? Take a step back and think about it and what these guys are doing. And I would the next time I get a chance to talk to him, hopefully in the off-season, more casual setting, and interview him, I want to know, how the calls were made to try and find O-linemen and try and find players when you're desperate, because it isn't the NFL. You're not making these calls and saying, hey, here's a $500,000, $800,000, $900,000 absolute guarantee money in the bank. These guys have jobs there, and to try and pull them back into professional football, a lot of times that would have to be so difficult.
Well, and the one thing that he alluded to today, did Jeremy O'Day, was the fact that the team went into training camp. He went out and he made a concerted effort to make sure that he had offensive linemen coming in. He wanted to make sure that he addressed the weakness from the season before, and he had 3 guys retire on him before he even went ahead and got to Saskatoon for training camp.
I remember that talking to you and Luke when you guys were up at Griffith Stadium in Saskatoon, and we were talking about that, and you said he was proactive. He was in front of this. Mm-hmm. And then you have retire. You're not expecting that. So right there, he's behind the 8 ball.
Oh, yeah. And he mentioned how him, Kyle Carson, the scouting staff, all were trying to stay one step ahead, right? Always find where that next offensive lineman might be going down the road, right? Like, can you imagine getting his phone? You're kidding me. Again? What? Jamarcus Hart? No. I can only imagine.
I go back to when I was a youngster and I worked in the transportation industry just part-time, and on days that we're seeing in Regina and Saskatoon and around Saskatchewan with all this snow and trying to get pieces of freight out, and this guy calls in sick, and then this guy calls in sick, and then this truck breaks down, and then this, and now, right? Like that's where becoming a manager always, and I did the manager thing for a bit, and everyone always told me, be careful what you wish for. And in the case of Jeremy O'Day and being the general manager of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, I don't think that can be echoed loud enough.
True. And you were talking about calls, by the way. One call that he hasn't got is from the BC Lions, who are looking to deal a quarterback. We will talk to Suits about that coming up after 5 o'clock. Also going to talk about some basketball action that's going on up in Saskatoon. The Dominican Republic playing Team Canada, and it's a qualification window. It's kind of an interesting opportunity, especially for the Dominican Republic team that hasn't seen snow before. Can you imagine landing in Saskatoon looking around like, uh-oh?
As soon as you say that, all I'm thinking, did they bring any of those sweet Dominican cigars?
Kids, I'm just going to say they're like chocolate bars. Okay, kids? Just saying. We are going to talk about basketball in a moment. We're streaming at sportscage.com. Of course, you'll find us on our YouTube channel. Hit the like button, subscribe, or, hey, thanks for listening as always, here on 620 CKRM. Dave Thomas, Barney Shynkaruk, Alan Lee, Colson Schultz, Curtis Gammon, the crew here at the Sports Cage on a Thursday afternoon. The news of the day, of course, is Tanner Howe of the Regina Pats has been traded to the Calgary Hitmen. The two players that are going to arrive back in time for the Pats' next game are a defenseman with some local ties, as well as a forward that is exciting for the Regina Pats, but that's kind of starting to fill up the text line this afternoon, Barney, as I take a quick peek over, and I don't know, people are calling me out, and I don't know who it is. It's Norm. I don't know if you know Norm or not, but the Capital Ford Lincoln text line 306-936-6262. Capital Ford Lincoln, Saskatchewan's #1 Ford retailer, capitalfordlincoln.com.
I'm going to, full disclosure, I don't know if I know a Norm.
Okay.
In the history of my life, I don't know if I know one guy named Norm that I would know.
Well, for some reason, Norm knows me from Weyburn, and he knows that I'm a Canucks fan, and so he says the most memorable trade is Cam Neely going to Boston, and that one hurts. That one hurts, because that was one of the worst all time.
How did that happen again? Like, he was so young.
He was so young, and the Canucks kind of, for lack of a better term, didn't see the potential in him. They thought his skating was bad, and again, they just didn't think it would work.
Yeah. And that's another guy that people forget, that jersey, or that's where he started.
Yeah. Well, and then the other one that jumps off the page too is Eric Lindros. I mentioned it earlier, right? Let's face it, Eric didn't want to go to Quebec, whatever, but really the trade that was made for him to go to Philadelphia allowed Colorado to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, like I don't know people that live in Quebec City, but I'm sure there's still people that are so angry the team left because they were so set up after that trade. Yeah. It was, I guess the Patrick Waugh thing was the piece that we don't remember, and that was unbelievable by what was their general manager's name? I can see him. He just passed away a few years ago. Yeah, but that trade and the whole Lindros, I had a chance to interview him on the Monday Nooner podcast a few years ago, and we really talked about the World Juniors in Saskatoon, but we talked a little bit about that trade, and there was a number of reasons that he didn't feel that he wanted to go there and all that. But yeah, that one set up an organization for a long time.
Yeah. Well, how about, okay, so you mentioned Patrick Waugh. Do you ever associate, when you think Patrick Waugh, what jersey is he wearing? It's not Colorado, is it?
No, it'd be the old Montreal, and then his rookie year when we talked about street hockey on the program yesterday and small goalies. Yeah. When you look back, like how small he was in the net, and he challenged, and I'm not professing to be a goalie by any means, but he came out and challenged shooters so far out and was so acrobatic, and he had that twitchy neck, and he hit his post, and it was just so different. But yeah, Montreal jersey for sure.
Remember the small gear he wore in Montreal and how it just got bigger and bigger? And again, it's happened with all goalies all the time.
That's what I mean. You watch that rookie year when they won the Stanley Cup over Calgary, wasn't it? It looked like he was playing. Like nowadays, if you showed up with that gear to an adult safe D division game, you would get run out of the room. And this guy was playing in the Stanley Cup final in it back in the late 80s.
Okay, Jeff says, what about Nieuwendyk for Iginla? That's a memorable one.
That's why I was a Dallas Stars fan. So that one, and that's right in the heyday. That was a massive trade. And to be honest, I remember, I think I was working radio in Swift Current, and I didn't believe in Joe Nieuwendyk. I didn't like that trade at all. I thought there was other guys out there, and I can't remember who. But wow, that's just me being so oblivious. Just like when I was talking about Jeremy O'Day, that was me being oblivious to all the different factors that Joe Nieuwendyk brought to that team to make it complete.
Yeah. And wasn't there a time, though, where Calgary fans didn't like that? Who's this Iginla guy?
Absolutely, there was. Yeah, no, it was, but that's the short for fanatic.
Yeah,
right? That's how fans are.
Yeah, true. There's going to be fans in the seats up at SaskTel Center tonight. We are going to go and check in with the head coach of Team Canada, of course, the senior men's basketball team, hosting the Dominican Republic in a game that's a qualifier for the AmeriCup. We'll explain what that means. There's a tie-in to the Olympics, but your ears perked up when you heard that out in Leroy, Cody Glyden is working out there. Man, I tell you, those small town lotteries and draws are the salt of the earth.
How many of you could you put a number on how many of those that you've done in your radio career?
Oof, the number would be high, but it is awesome getting out to these communities. Like there are some that you'll never forget where you've been, right?
I had a chance to go out to the Leroy one a couple times with Cody, and Cody does yeoman's work, as they say out there. Cody, I want to say hi to Leona if you see her. But yeah, and just what those small town lotteries really mean to the communities, Dave, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because it allows them to keep their rinks open. It allows bowling alleys to be built. It allows ball diamonds to be repaired, golf courses.
And I just love when, I can't remember the gentleman's name that just bought that. He's listening to the SportsCage. Shout out to you. Thanks so much, because, that goes a long way. And it's almost like communities always helping communities, right? Like there's the Assiniboia one, and there's the Leroy one, then there's the, there's some up north, and it's just people, it's communities helping communities. And I know there's a lot of people that just like to play it. They're like, it's like the lottery. And for some reason, there's people out there in this world that like to gamble. Whatever, to each their own. But they're so fantastic. The money goes a long way. And just the other thing that I remember, and being in Leroy, I was in the Aberdeen one years ago as well, down in the Southwest in the Shaunavon area, was how many people need to pull it off. And there's always the worker bees, as they call them. That's like a buzzword nowadays. How many people in that small town, or they're driving in from their farm, or they're driving in from another community, and they're helping it, and they're answering phones at 6 a.m. No, I'll stay a little bit longer because so-and-so's calving, or so-and-so's doing whatever. It's just so Sasky. Hey, to go to my Netflix series thing, there's another little Netflix series you could do on small town lotteries.
You should do on the small town lodgings, shall we call it? Because you always have some great tales, like the time where I was down in Mossbank, hi to Colleen and the crew, and I stayed in the back of a women's clothing store. There's, Jim and the gang out in Fort Capel with Fort Knox. They do a terrific job year in and year out. Or what about my favorite one of all time, and I know they don't do it anymore, but Colin Lovequist, he can attest to this one. So we're down in Radville. If you're not familiar with Radville, it's just west of Weyburn, right? Highway 13. Am I right?
Yeah.
My car drives itself there. Yeah. So we're down in Radville, and we're staying at this bed and breakfast. So again, fantastic. They're going to cook us breakfast in the morning. It's great. And they've just gone ahead and they've renovated it. And so the renovations that they've done is they've created theme rooms for you to stay in. So Colin gets the room that's the rider room. So that's awesome, right? You look inside, there's rider stuff everywhere. There's the pillowcases and it's all riders. That's beautiful. One of the other people that were there, they got the romance suite, right? So it's kind of like a honeymoon suite. So, they got the satin sheets and all that stuff. I literally in Radville, Saskatchewan got the Just Friends room with 2 twin beds. Now.
No.
Tell me you cannot gauge your relationship with a trip to the Radvilles. The Radville bed and breakfast. What room do you want here?
What a great theme room. I was waiting for a Radville theme room on maybe the Radville Nationals, their senior hockey team.
Yeah.
They could do one there. And then now it all makes sense. Colson and Curtis and Alan, you guys are there. Dave telling this story about him staying in interesting places at these lotteries. Now we understand why he wears those weird yoga pants all the time. Back of the women's
the back of the women's clothing store. Yeah.
Nice.
Skates and skirts, by the way, just so you're aware.
Was it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, no. And what did Cody say they're at? They're under 900 tickets or something
that's pretty
like
good.
that. And it's Thursday, right? There's another day. So
get to
fantastic.
it. Great odds of winning
work.
those small town draws, by the way, too, just so you're aware. That's why they're good.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Less tickets, right? Less tickets, better odds.
Oh, the Friends room.
Just Friends, not just. Just remember that. All right, we're going to Saskatoon. Head coach of Canada's senior men's basketball team. He will join us in a moment. You're watching the all-new Sports Cage, streaming at sportscage.com and, of course, on our YouTube channel. And as always here on 620 CKRM. Dave Thomas, Barney Shynkaruk, the team here on the Sports Cage. We're going to head to Saskatoon momentarily. Big basketball game coming up tonight. I know you've got a big game going on in Winnipeg, but everybody is safe and sound after the roads and the conditions that were out there today.
Yeah. Great job by all the parents driving and bus drivers and all that. Yesterday, funny little tidbit story for you. The Regina Pat Canadians and Estevan game was postponed, and coaches made the right decision. And it was a decision also the bus company said, no, we're not going. And I think that's always the right decision, right? It's just a hockey game, and it's a hockey game in November. Like, really, we can postpone things. So hopefully everybody's making it safe everywhere they're going. And I hear there's more snow on the road. Cody Glyden, you included. Make sure you get home safe.
Absolutely. And of course, keep it locked right here on 620 CKRM for the latest road conditions and the storm that we're kind of tracking our way into Saskatchewan, which is going to make some Mexican basketball players on Sunday raise an eyebrow up in Saskatoon. That's because there's actually 2 international basketball games that are going to be taking place at SaskTel Center up in Saskatoon. The first is tonight. Team Canada is going to be on the court taking on the Dominican Republic. And I had an opportunity earlier to catch up with the head coach of Canada's men's senior basketball team, Nathaniel Allen. We are so pleased to be joined by the head coach of Canada's basketball team for the FIBA Men's AmeriCup qualifier that's going to be taking place in Saskatoon, Nathaniel Mitchell. Coach, thanks so much for taking some time for us.
Oh, thank you. Anytime. I appreciate the opportunity to come on here and speak.
Now, I'm sure that you heard about Saskatchewan winters. Welcome to it. It's here now.
Yes, absolutely. Good 25 centimeters of snow. We're loving it. It's also good for our opponents.
That's to say the least when you're facing the Dominican Republic and Mexico, of course, Thursday and Sunday at SaskTel Center. Well, Coach, maybe first and foremost, for those that aren't familiar with the AmeriCup, can you tell me a little bit about the event and, of course, the window that we've now entered?
Yeah, I mean, the AmeriCup is basically a tournament that will be hosted this summer in Nicaragua. And this tournament's very significant. For us, it's the prelude to getting into the World Cup qualifiers, which eventually get you into the World Cup, which eventually gets you into the Olympics. So in order to qualify for those things, we need to win these games and put us in position to qualify for that tournament. So we're really excited to be here in Saskatoon and have a great home crowd. and cheer us on and just us, to help us win 2 games.
Now, I would suggest that there's a lot of momentum with the men's national team, especially following the performance in Paris. How do you carry that momentum over in what is a 4-year cycle?
Yeah, I mean, this is a brand new quad. We got to continue doing what we feel that has worked. And I think, our overall coach, Jordi Hernandez, has done a really good job implementing a system that we want to continue to do. We continue to develop our players. Our front office with Michael Bartlett and Roland Barrett has done a good job of continuing to recruit the players and stay within our system. So we want to do the best possible job we can to continue this momentum and keep climbing the ranks of where we are currently, which is 5th in the world, which is a lot better where we've been in the past. So we just want to continue to improve.
Nathaniel Mitchell is the coach of the FIBA Men's AmeriCup Canadian squad that will be taking part on the court at SaskTel Center both Thursday and Sunday up in Saskatoon. And Coach, obviously you don't have a lot of time to put your team together, but how do you prepare them for a couple of key games?
Well, yeah, that's kind of the beauty of having continuity within our country. Players that continue to come back and sacrifice and leave their teams that are playing over in Europe, some playing in the NBA G League, and which is very important for us because they have a base of things that we've always implemented. And this goes back to ground up of our youth ages and the youth camps that we've had. We're actually blessed to have 3 players that were on our national team that won the World Cup when they were under 19 guys and now getting their chances at the senior men's team. So these things allow us to continue to have continuity, continue to grow, and we need a few practices to get ready for the team and put on a performance.
As a coach, how do you prepare? Obviously, you have to get a pulse of what your team is doing and how they've prepared entering this event. But what about your opposition? You've got the Dominican Republic on Thursday and Mexico on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've been blessed to have multiple opportunities to be within these windows in the past 8 years. We've been able to play against DR multiple times, home and away. We have a little bit of sense of what they typically like to do, watching film and some of the players that they've had. So personnel doesn't change that much over the years. Some guys get more experience and older, some young guys come in. So we have to use our experience from the coaching and the player side of it to be able to prepare for these games. And for me, diving into film and watching it multiple times is where I go. So I'm just excited for the opportunity to continue to help our country grow.
Well, it's exciting that you mentioned the experience with your resume. Boy, it speaks for itself. Time in the NBA with the Hornets and the Raptors and Milwaukee Bucks as well. The G League and coaching in China. How does a guy from Toronto end up coaching in the Chinese Basketball Association?
Honestly, it's just been a big blessing for me. The relationships that I've garnered over the course of my basketball coaching career, just continue to grind, put my head down and try to help all the players develop. And through that, I've been able to develop relationships that's been able to put me in situations to continue to grow as a coach, being a head coach in China, being head coach for our national team, as well as I can't say enough about being an assistant under great coaches that I've worked for here on our national team, from Jay Triano to Nick Nurse to Jordi Hernandez to Nate Bjorken, Roy Rana, there's been Gordy Herbert. I've worked for a good amount of coaches in our country that have helped me grow, and I wouldn't be here without them.
Well, it's truly a global game, basketball. We had evidence of that at the Paris Games and, of course, long before that. But when we're talking global game in hockey, we sometimes talk about how different regions like Europe or Russia have different styles of play. Is that true as well when it comes to playing different countries? They may have different variations in the style that they want to bring to the court?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's the beauty of basketball. I think you can get an aggression from certain plays. You may play more of a set-oriented when you're playing against some European teams. Usually in the Americas, you have an athletic, very fast-paced type of game. So I think all over the globe, you have little hints of things of doing the same. Our players being able to play in Europe, play in Asia, playing here in Canada and the U.S., it helps us prepare for all those scenarios and situations.
So, Coach, what do you need to see from your team to be successful over the next couple of games?
We're definitely looking for an aggression. We want to be the aggressors, especially being at home. We want to be able to make sure that we're able to handle the ball pressure and give ball pressure. And I think once we're doing that and executing the way we can, we'll be in a good shape. We want to put ourselves in position to win these games. So I really think our guys can do that, and I'm hoping that they do.
And what are you expecting from SaskTel Center, Saskatoon, and Saskatchewan fans cheering you on?
Just expecting a great home crowd. I think we talked to our players the other day and just how much of a privilege it is to be here in a great province that supports their teams, supports sports, and we want to pay homage to the fans with how hard we play outside.
Well, if any of your players are looking to pay it back, I do have a driveway that needs shoveled. Just throwing that out there.
I definitely hear you on that one.
Coach, appreciate you spending some time with us today. We wish you all the best this weekend. Enjoy Saskatchewan, and here's to continuing to climb that ladder globally in basketball with Team Canada.
I appreciate you. Thank you very much, Ed.
Team Canada's national senior men's coach, Nathaniel Mitchell, joining us. Of course, tip-off tonight at SaskTel Center is at 7 o'clock. Coming up, the dominoes are starting to fall in the Canadian Football League. We'll tell you what's landed where, coming up with Glen Suitor after the news, right here on the all-new Sports Cage, streaming at sportscage.com and on 620 CKRM. Dave Thomas filling in for Barney Shynkaruk on this Thursday. Barney had to get to the store and buy more knitting yarn, so he'll take off for the rest of the night. Leave us in charge. It's Alan actually in charge, with Colson Curtis and I just kind of handling things from here in the studio. Of course, big news in Regina today. The Regina Pats trade captain and Pittsburgh Penguin prospect Tanner Howe to the Calgary Hitmen. If you missed it, you can read about it at sportscage.com. We'll have more details on that coming up. Head back to Saskatoon with international basketball before 6 o'clock. And yes, CFL news. Speaking of trades, yes, Tanner Howe was a big trade today in Regina. And it's not often that you can predict a trade coming, but we now can in the CFL. With the help of Glen Suitor.
The all-new Sports Cage with CFL and Saskatchewan Rough Rider legend Glen Suitor is brought to you by Quality Tire. With 9 locations across Saskatchewan, visit qualitytire.ca.
Suits joins us on a Thursday. First of all, you look fine after the Grey Cup. What a display of Canadian football, and a great job done by the organizing committee. It looked sensational.
Yeah, it really was. Some of the numbers are coming in. You saw that there were 10 million unique viewers to the championship, which is now why I understand why I get the butterflies before the Grey Cup after doing well over 1,000 games. And I look at when I walk around the field, 2 days before the game, and I look at 3 or 4 trucks when in the regular season we have 1. I look at all the cameras, which is 3 times the number that we have when we do a game in the regular season. And it's hard not to get caught up in it and think, this is a big show. This is a big deal. Like, and then you have to kind of separate yourself from that, or else you'll lose your mind. So, you got to go back to, but it's just a game. And you're going to just try to enhance the game. So haven't looked back at yet, Dave. I don't know how long you wait till you listen back to some games and try to do some self-scouting. I usually wait a couple of weeks, and I will certainly do that this time. But from all indications from producers and stuff, they're pretty happy with the show. And, the game was a one-possession game going into the fourth quarter. And as a TV show, that's what we look for.
Okay, can you give me the insight on you? Because obviously the preparation and for your analysis that you do week to week is outstanding, because the insights you have, I'm like, why couldn't I have figured that out? But in saying that, I can't see you doing any more preparation or different preparation for the game and the Grey Cup. Would your approach change at all then with the different way that it's being presented?
It doesn't change, but because there's so much more time, I find myself stacking facts and digging deeper into each player. I mean, you can start to look into bowl games from 5 years ago for some guys, and then all of a sudden go, I've been covering this player for 3 years, and I didn't realize he had 189 yards in the Sugar Bowl or whatever it was. And then you go back and you spend an hour looking at that, and then you make some notes on that, thinking, there might be an aspect of this because he makes a nice one-hand catch. If he does it again in the Grey Cup, maybe I could bring it up and we could roll in. So that's a call to a video guy at TSN to say, hey, could you find this Sugar Bowl play back? So when you start to do that, because you only have two teams and you have the whole week to get ready for it, you start to go, my chart starts to look completely swamped with information, which can actually be detrimental to just relaxing and letting the game tell the story. That's what I always have to remind myself. I'm sure you do the same thing. It's not us in the booth. It's not even me creating storylines or anything like that. The game itself will tell the story. We just have to fill in some details and add some perspective and ideas from experience.
So, over under 3 video guys at TSN that see your number come up and have got you blocked. I do not want to find something from 2004.
Hey, sometimes I do it like 2 hours before the game, and you should see the look I get on that one. But you know what? They always come through because our crew is so passionate about the game. It's the above and beyond because they love it. They love the game, and they'll go dig into the archives and go on YouTube and all the different ways they have to copy that and get it to an actual usable form in the game. I'm not even sure of all the steps, but they're the best in the business.
All right. We had an opportunity to talk to Jeremy O'Day today down at Mosaic Stadium. Ryan Rigmaiden was named the new general manager out in British Columbia. We've been talking trades throughout the show with the big one done by the Regina Pats today, but there's a guaranteed one coming from BC. Apparently, Mr. O'Day hasn't received a call from his colleague in BC just yet, but is this strange coming right out and saying, yeah, we're trading Vernon Adams?
I don't, it's different. No question. I found both Ryan Rigmaiden's first press conference and Ed Hervey's first press conference in Edmonton very interesting in how, let's say, edgy they were in being honest and transparent and open. And Rigmaiden saying, yeah, we're going to trade Vernon Adams. I remember back to Mark Trestman and what was his name? Not James Franklin. He was a quarterback that was the up-and-comer in Edmonton that everyone thought was going to be the next guy. Mm-hmm. And he ended up in Toronto with Mark Trestman and Ricky Ray. And on the phone call, the press said, when is he going to become the starting quarterback? When are you going to mention that? And he said, whoa, Ricky Ray's our starting quarterback. The other kids on our roster are going to have to make the team first. Then they move into the number 2 spot, and that's where they sit. Well, our quarterback runs our team. And that press conference alone, I guarantee Ricky Ray heard, and it empowered him to be the leader of that team. That year was the 100th Grey Cup that the Argos won. And I think about it was the Grey Cup they won in Ottawa, not the 100th. But it was the thought being that, Rigmaiden is saying Nathan Rourke's our quarterback. And Nathan will have heard that through this announcement that VA will be traded. So there's no speculation, there's no issues. And I also thought it was very interesting that he said, and Vernon Adams won't have a say in where he's traded. We will do what's best for the organization. I love Vernon Adams. A lot of people do. I'm one of them. I'm top of that list. I've sang his praises every time we've done a game. I think he's a fantastic leader. But I think it's great for everybody involved, including the quarterbacks, to be clear and concise. Let them know that this is the direction we're going. And you're going to give now Nathan Rourke a chance to take that responsibility, formulate his plan for the offseason, and get ready to lead a football team in Vancouver. And wherever VA lands, maybe Calgary, who knows? Edmonton might be, a consideration. And the only reason I say Calgary, I'm not saying it from inside information, Dave. I'm saying it more from just reading tea leaves, is that with Calgary moving on at quarterback, VA doesn't want to, I don't think, go too far away from Washington. I think he'd love to stay in the West. He'd love to stay as close to Vancouver as he could. And there's some interesting coaching dynamics in Calgary that might work well for VA.
So having said that, as an athlete, as a broadcaster, as you name the business you're in, you always want to operate from a position of strength, correct? So you mentioned it, and I'm bang on, right? So you're helping out your athletes, you're helping out the organization. Everybody knows which direction you're going in, but haven't you also hamstrung yourselves a little bit, saying, okay, we are moving this guy, which basically everybody knew anyways, but are you still dealing with or from a position of strength when it comes to trying to get the most in return for the asset you want to move?
I don't think so, really. And the reason I say it is because I think most of the teams in the league knew that was happening anyway. I mean, they'll take, it'll depend on how many teams. The competition comes and how many teams will be interested in Vernon Adams. That's going to be what dictates sort of what the Lions can get in return. It really has nothing to do with some sort of mysterious secret as to which guy they might be moving, Nathan Rourke or VA. And I think everybody in the league knew it was going to be Vernon Adams, including Vernon Adams. So this just cleared it up completely. And it basically said to all the other teams that might be interested, give us your best offer. We're moving Vernon Adams. I don't think there's a problem. I don't think you play games with that, especially when you're dealing with people's lives. I mean, Vernon Adams knows he's got to be prepared to move. And I think I just saw him on Twitter. There was a lady on Twitter that was saying she needed a ball signed or something for a charity. Again, more work that VA does. He said absolutely he'd do it because he's coming to Vancouver to gather up some stuff in about a month. So again, little tea leaves there that he's coming to gather up his stuff. He knows he's moving. Everybody is clear on what's going to happen.
Well, there was more pivotal talk a little further east from Vancouver, and I don't know about you, but if I just got hired for a new job, I'm not sure that I would say that my employer is a laughing stock, but that's what Ed Hervey did when he was announced as the general manager of the Edmonton Elks, and he's got a quarterback pivotal decision to make as well.
Yeah, I loved it. I really did. I mean, Ed Hervey was saying what everyone's been thinking for a year and a half, 2 years, and maybe even before that. Like, they had become that. They couldn't win a game. They started seasons 0-9 and 0-7. And the way they were mishandling their quarterback situation, waiting till 0-9 before they decided maybe we should try something different at quarterback, and waiting till they're 0-7 to do the same. He was also asked, and this was important, Barney and I talked about it on Tuesday, the first question, or one of the first, was, what about Trey Ford? And it was a very interesting answer because he was honest there as well. Ed Hervey saying he's a dynamic player. He's a player that scares you when he starts running around. And I don't know him well personally, so that's what we're going to do over the next little while. We're going to get to know each other. He wants to hear from Trey himself as to what's gone on in Edmonton. And I can tell you that's going to be a very revealing discussion. That I know for a fact. I won't go any deeper into it than that. But that will be a very interesting discussion when Trey Ford talks about how he's felt with what's gone on over the last couple of years there. And I also thought it was interesting that Hervey finally said sort of, hey, if we can find that common ground, and in other words, he's saying, I'm not just going to let Trey Ford dictate how I feel about it. I'm going to wait, listen to him. Then he's going to hear my expectations. And then if we can come together somewhere, we give this kid a good opportunity to compete for the starting job in Edmonton. That's all Trey Ford's ever wanted. And I think he deserves the right to, from what we've seen so far in small sample sizes, he deserves that. He deserves it. And he's a dynamic guy. Forget the Canadian part, which is obviously great for selling tickets, but forget that. Just as an athlete, this kid is special.
Glen Suitor joins us, and Suits, before we leave talking about Edmonton, I do have to throw a little curveball your way. There's a lady named Teresa, works at Mosaic Stadium, and she asked me a question, and I actually said that I would forward it along to you. So here's us doing it over sportscage.com or on the radio. Her question pertained to Ed Hervey, who was an employee in Hamilton. How was he able to leave Hamilton for what would seem to be a horizontal move as the GM in Hamilton to the Edmonton Elks organization?
Well, there's no hard, fast rule. I think, every organization would have their own sort of way to handle something like that, to give a person or a player, how many times have we seen a player that may get an NFL opportunity that may be in the middle of his contract? I know there's some teams that sort of have an official way to do that. Some teams that'll just say, no, we would let a guy go and do that. If he had a chance to make life-changing money doing the exact same thing he's doing up here, why would we hold him back from getting that opportunity? I think once you see lots of movement in that, that's why league rules come in when it comes to players. In other words, they'll say he is still the team's property if he goes down to the NFL. I think there's something to be said for doing that. But it could be as simple as the organization looking at Ed and saying, look, that's where you used to play. This is an opportunity to be in charge of the team, to run the team the way you want to run it, through all the life lessons that he's had since the first time he was in Edmonton and evolving the way he's evolved. I thought he was interesting in how he described that too. He goes, I'm really, really fiery, but I'm much more calm. and I understood what he was saying, but it was just funny how he said it, because he was saying, listen, I'm not going to put up with we're going to just try and make the playoffs and things like that. He was talking about this team. You're either going to fit in this team with this culture that I know of, or you're going to be gone. And I don't care how good of a player you are on the field. I thought that was very revealing. And then he also wanted to let us know that he's not the guy who's going to lose his temper in a press conference or on the field or something like that. He has evolved from, the early days that we saw a little of that. So, yeah, I think to answer the question is basically it could be as simple as an organization saying, look, this is a really good opportunity for you. Forget your contract. We'll rip that up. You go ahead and sign over there, and good luck to you. I mean, it can be as simple as that.
Okay, we've talked about Trey Ford. We mentioned Vernon Adams Jr. The other domino that may be set to fall is Montreal, where they have to essentially make a decision, it sounds like, between Cody Fajardo and Davis Alexander. Is that maybe one of the biggest pieces that have to fall in the postseason before everything else sorts its way out? And we haven't mentioned that Trevor Harris also is a free agent coming, and Jeremy O'Day talked about how much he loves having Trevor Harris around this organization. There's a lot to consider, but again, back to Davis Alexander. Is he the next kind of big chip that has to fall somewhere?
Well, I would say that there are, I'm not sure that Montreal will want to have both of those guys and have to deal with the weekly questions. If, let's say they start out slowly offensively and then all the questions come up. I think BC was an example of how that can go a little sideways on you with Nathan Rourke and Vernon Adams once he was healthy. So I think they're going to try to avoid that. So they have to make that tough decision, and I get it. That once that decision is made, then it opens it up for teams to know what they might be going after, even if it's Cody Fajardo for that matter.
Yeah.
But I think there's risk in both of these things. Let's go to Saskatchewan for a second. You know what you have in Trevor Harris, and by the way, I'm going to add this. The back half of the season when Trevor Harris returned from injury, the first 5 games, he wasn't completely right physically. And he gutted it out and got through it. I won't say on one leg because he was rehabbing and it was getting better every week. But it wasn't quite right for a good portion of the back half of the season, and he still played great. You know what you have in Trevor Harris for sure, which is a potential to win a championship. If you have a team around him and keep him healthy, you have a chance. Now, the downside there is he's 38 and the injuries play a factor. But you have downside in Davis Alexander too, because he hasn't done it through a full season. There's a huge unknown there. And I think Davis Alexander is going to be a great player in the league, as I do with Nathan Rourke, as I do with Trey Ford. But until we know, we don't know really. And they have to go and put a whole season together, highs and lows, wins and losses, 4 interception games with 4 touchdown games, make sure they weather all of those storms and come out of the other end ready to compete in the playoffs and go after a cup. If once they do that, you can get a better grasp for what your risk and reward is with these players. But I think what we do sometimes is we get really attracted to the new shiny object.
Yeah.
And we start to think, Trevor's getting old and maybe we want the new shiny object. I would say, there's pros and cons with both. Don't get me wrong. But, man, Trevor Harris, I would be very reluctant to go crazy finding a guy that hasn't really done it yet and take that chance when you have Trevor Harris in your room. Not to mention all the stuff that he can do off the field for you as a leader in the locker room and bringing that group together.
So maybe take me behind the scenes of the TSN production once again. I don't know if there was a wrap-up or a pregame meal or anything, but did you sit beside Bo Levi Mitchell and, hey, Bo, where are you playing next year?
I can't remember if he was allowing me to say this or not, so I'll just say it. I did ask Bo, but I didn't ask him where. I said, are you playing next year? Are you going to play next year? And he goes, absolutely. So he's going to play. And the way he played in the back half of the season, finally understanding what Scott Milanovic was actually looking for and them actually getting on the same page. I think once that happened, we saw the potential of that offense. I'd be shocked if he's anywhere else than Hamilton.
One more quarterback question that I want to throw your way then. Nobody's talking about McLeod Bethel Thompson. He had amazing numbers. The only number that he didn't have was the big one that counts, right? He didn't have the wins. Should we be talking about him next year?
I think he could be a piece. With his age and that he has been such a journeyman. I mean, when we're talking about Bo and we're talking about McLeod Bethel Thompson, those are 2 very different categories. One guy is going automatically into the Hall of Fame, MOPs, MVPs of Grey Cups, champions, rings. The other guy has put up good numbers and played on a ton of teams. And I'm not disparaging McLeod Bethel Thompson. I think he's been very good for a lot of organizations, not only in Canada, but across the U.S. But to make him your guy to start the season at his age, I don't know. You can be young and up and down with a high ceiling of potential. I'm not sure you can be 38 and up and down, or what is McLeod? I think he's 38, 39, and up and down.
36.
36. Okay.
36,
I aged him a little bit. I was thinking Trevor Harris age, but Trevor Harris, again, we know Trevor Harris can get a team to the championship. We know Trevor Harris knows what it looks like to win a championship on a roster. And we saw how he can compete at his age and what he does off the field. That stuff is not in question. I think with McLeod Bethel Thompson, it's a different discussion completely. I think he could be a piece somewhere to help someone, but not in the way that Edmonton did it last year, where they just, after what Trey Ford did the year before to actually save some jobs and then just bench him and say, this 36-year-old, 35-year-old is going to come in and just be the starter. I think that was, we saw the results.
Okay, before we let you go, Glenn, if as evidenced by my fantasy football team, I should be nowhere considered a general manager or any type of management position in any kind of sport ever. But if you got to be a general manager, you've assessed the positions for the Saskatchewan Roughriders moving forward, which is what Jeremy O'Day, Corey Mace, Kyle Carson, the rest of the crew are doing right now at Mosaic Stadium. What are you looking at?
I'm looking at how the Argos beat the Bombers 3 times last year, and I'm building my team very similar to that. I really am. They have a quarterback. They have some great receivers. They have some excellent Canadian talent. I would be looking at the D-line and stacking the heck out of that. And I'm not talking about the top 4. I'm talking about the top 7. 7 D-linemen on your roster in rotation, all of which could be all-stars. Now, that's easy to wave a wand and say that's what I want. A little harder to go find that. But in free agency or wherever it may be, find the best 6 or 7 D-linemen you can possibly find, build it that way, make them very physical on the line of scrimmage and hard for any quarterback, including the Bombers, because let's be honest, that is still the team. If you want to get to the Grey Cup out of the West, you got to be Winnipeg. Before, back in the day, it was Calgary and Doug Flutie. Now it's Winnipeg. And it still probably will be coming out of training camp next year. So that's how I would be looking at it in free. Well, we'll talk a lot about free agency as we get closer and closer, Dave. But, to get more specific, but look at the Toronto model, how they built their team, and build your team very similar. That's what I'd be looking at.
All right, Glen Suitor. Hey, you know what? The Regina Pats made a big trade today. We've been talking about memorable trades. Of course, in Riderville, Ronnie, of course, was acquired by trade. Darian Durant acquired by trade. In Vancouver, the Canucks made the biggest blunder of all time, getting rid of Cam Neely and even trading Trevor Linden. Any memorable trade that sticks out in your mind back in the day ever? Or from ever?
I used to, as a kid, I used to sort of like the Canucks. I certainly watched them a little bit. I'm a hockey fan like every Canadian. And when they traded Trevor Linden, that was it. I was done. I was a free agent as far as my fandom for an NHL team. It turned out to be the Nashville Predators because my son went down to Nashville in school. And I went to a bunch of Predators games, which were honestly $20 right on the top of Broadway. It was awesome to go to see the NHL in prime seats with Tim McGraw playing in between periods. It was crazy. But it became the Predators because of that trade. Trevor Linden was the heart and soul of this team in Vancouver. I don't know. That was awful.
Glenn, love the insight. As always, take care. Again, terrific job on the Grey Cup broadcast. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Glen Suitor joining us on the all-new Sports Cage. Coming up, we head back to Saskatoon to talk some basketball, and we are going to get some more thoughts. And bull riding, Colson, you tell me? Bull riding. All right. It's all coming up here. It's the all-new Sports Cage, streaming at sportscage.com and live on 620 CKRM. Dave Thomas in for Barney. Shynkaruk. Another cooler evening heading across Saskatchewan, minus double digits for most of the province if you're heading out on the roads. Again, they've improved a bit, but still a little bit slick. Boys, get ready to turn on your microphones. I'm Dave Thomas in for Barney Shynkaruk. That was our not-so-subtle hint in case, of course, you missed the rehearsal that we had earlier this afternoon. But it's not every day that you're driving by Mosaic Stadium and you get passed by an air seeder. But it happened to me today as the move-in is on for the Western Canadian Agribition. And if you go to our Sports Cage podcast, you'll find it under this podcast tab at sportscage.com. You would have heard a conversation that you were involved in yesterday, Colson.
Yeah, it was Barney and Chris freaking out about the Agribition coming in, and one of the events that are going on, we gave tickets away to yesterday. It's the professional bullfighters. And so you weren't there yesterday, so here's the video that Agribition has put out promoting the event.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bullfighting. Not riding, fighting.
Correct.
So for folks that are watching the stream at sportscage.com and, of course, on our YouTube channel where we invite you to like and subscribe, these guys are nuts. It's like kind of rodeo clowns. Is that what again, that's not what these athletes are, but they're enticing the animals to run at them, and they jump over top.
Barney used the word teasing, which I think is fitting. So, yeah.
Interesting. Now, so they were wearing jerseys. It's not a team sport, is it?
I don't know. I haven't ever watched, so I guess I'd have to get down there and find out. But I imagine there could be different levels of competition, maybe teams, maybe solo, individual. It's freestyle bullfighting is what it's promoted as. So
Okay. Western Canadian Agribition, again, they're moving in right now over at Real District, right?
yes.
Thank you. I'm new here, right? All right, it goes next week. Of course, we're going to be there. Of course, so too will Ryan Young. It's kind of like his Super Bowl, Grey Cup week next week with all the folks that are coming to town. So hopefully the snow that we're anticipating on the weekend doesn't alter anyone's plans. But the snow has definitely not going to put a wrench into people's plans, but it's been an eye-opener for Team Dominican Republic and Team Mexico. Yes, the National Senior Basketball AmeriCup qualification window is on in Saskatoon. Tonight, Team Canada is going to be taking on Team Dominican Republic. Now, this is ramifications for the team trying to qualify for the Olympics. So it's the start of that quad, right? So the 4-year term, the 4-year run that they've got. And one of the athletes is guard Aaron Best, who I had a chance to catch up with earlier. We're so pleased to be joined by Team Canada guard Aaron Best. The countdown to the FIBA AmeriCup qualifiers is on up in Saskatoon. You mentioned the snow. You're liking it? Is that what I hear?
Definitely a good reminder that I'm back home. It's a nice way to be welcome back. I'm not gonna lie. It's a nice reminder of the childhood days running around and playing in the snow. So happy to see it.
Well, I guess at least it's not minus 40, right?
And I'm not responsible for cleaning it up, which is also a bonus.
Win-win for everyone. Well, let's talk about the sweep that has been going on right now with Team Canada. Of course, you swept your first qualification window, and now you've got Dominican Republic and Mexico coming up in Saskatoon. First and foremost, how is the team feeling going into this weekend's games in Saskatoon?
We're feeling great. Great group of guys, great staff, and we're just all excited to get a chance to compete together again.
Well, if my information is correct, you'll be playing games 21 and 22 with a maple leaf on your chest. What does that mean to you?
It's an honor. It's an honor. Anytime I get the call, I take that very seriously. I love to play, for Canada, and to get a chance to do it with, people I've grown up playing against and playing with, makes it even more special.
Well, maybe take me through your journey. I know that you went to Ryerson and now playing some pro in Poland. How does that happen for a kid from Scarborough?
Man, lots of hard work and had a lot of great coaching along the way. Great coaching. My family has been, truly one of the best foundations I've had in my life. And just dedication, hard work, and I'm very blessed to be able to, to be where I am.
Aaron Best from Team Canada. Of course, they'll open up the FIBA AmeriCup qualifier tournament in Saskatoon against the Dominican Republic on Thursday. And I guess being a child of the 90s like you were, would that mean that the Toronto Raptors were maybe the influence as to where you took your athleticism and the sport you wish to pursue?
Absolutely. I was a huge Vince Carter fan growing up. That's a lot of the reason why. I kind of fell in love with the game, and that was pretty much it. It was pretty much over from there.
Now, in Saskatchewan, we're fortunate enough to have exposure to the Canadian Elite Basketball League. We don't get the NBA game, though, as much, but you're coming in and you'll be performing in front of a lot of youngsters who will be looking towards you as being their Vince Carter. Does that sink in? Does that make you feel any different kind of way?
Honestly, I try to just live in the moment, and it's amazing that I could be in that kind of a position. I honestly don't think about it like that too much, but when you put it that way, yeah, it's pretty awesome to be in that position to, give back in that way. Because I know how much it did for me. So it's definitely amazing to be in that position.
Aaron, what goes into preparing for this weekend? Obviously, there's a physical and a mental component, and you don't get to be with your teammates for weeks on end and leading up to the event. How does that work for you?
Just a lot of scouting, a lot of watching film, and a lot of watching film and walkthroughs, and just a lot of information. But we have luckily a great group of guys, and we pick up on things pretty quickly, and I think we've been able to move along at a great pace and kind of pick things up as far as what we want to do. So I mean, we're very fortunate in that way. Like, we have a big player pool of guys who have pretty much all played together at some point, and just we have that level of familiarity, which helps us, in these short windows.
And does that familiarity then also breed continuity in the fact that gelling and becoming a team and having that chemistry is easy to build or pick up right where you left off?
Absolutely. That was kind of the design of this once we started doing the windows, and I think we've been able to be pretty successful at it.
There's a lot of momentum from what this team was able to accomplish in Paris at the Olympics, and now I know that we're starting a new 4-year cycle. What does it mean to you to be at this part of the process, marching towards LA in 2028?
It's huge, man. It's we all understand that it's one big team, and we might not all get a chance to play on that 12-man Olympic roster, but we all understand that this is an integral part in getting there. So definitely an honor and something I don't take lightly.
Aaron Best is joining us from Team Canada. The FIBA America Cup kicks off, or I guess I should say tips off, at SaskTel Center Thursday night, continues on Sunday when you take on the Mexicans. Let's talk about the Dominican Republic, though. What can we expect as fans to see from them coming to the court? What are they going to bring? What are they going to challenge you with?
Very tough, very physical team. Also got a lot of talent. We've had a lot of games against them in the past, and but yeah, very, very tough, very physical team, and definitely going to be an exciting game.
So what are they going to see from you and the rest of Team Canada?
I mean, just we just try to play tough on defense and try to make everything as difficult as possible. That's our focus, and that has been our focus, and that's going to be something that we focus on going forward.
So playing in Poland and at Ryerson, obviously you have played in front of large crowds before. What are you anticipating from the crowd in Saskatoon?
Oh, lots of energy, lots of support. Looking forward to it.
Well, you said that you weren't going to clean up any snow, so I won't throw out the offer to come see my driveway, but as long as there's a seat open, I'll be cheering you on at SaskTel Center this weekend. I appreciate you doing this and taking some time for us, Aaron, and all the best going forward.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Aaron Best joining us from the men's national basketball team. They take on the Dominican Republic tonight, 7 o'clock at SaskTel Center. Then 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon, the Canadians will play the Mexicans. Again, it's a window. It's an opportunity to qualify for the America Cup, which then can lead to the World Cup, but then can lead to the Olympics. Yes, the journey begins in Saskatoon tonight. Again, tip-off at 7. Coming up, we're headed back to Alberta. We will hear from a guy. You know what? It's almost quitting time. And, well, this guy is just starting a new job, but he still took the opportunity to diss his new boss. We'll tell you about that coming up. It's the all-new SportsCage on sportscage.com and 620 CKRM. The all-new SportsCage continues on a Thursday afternoon. We're getting close to quitting time, Saskatchewan. Thanks for tuning in on 620 CKRM and, of course, streaming on our YouTube channel and at sportscage.com. The big news of the day today, Tanner Howe of the Regina Pats was traded to the Calgary Hitmen. Revisit that in just a moment. But I told you about Ed Hervey, and again, turned heads yesterday as he's introduced as the new general manager of the Edmonton Elks. And, well, he didn't pull any punches when it came to the franchise that he was joining.
I do not like where the club sits in the CFL as far as the perception. I would equate it to laughingstock. And it is our responsibility to remove ourselves from that. And I can assure you, I am going to work tirelessly to make that happen with the staff that I bring in, with the coaching staff that comes in, and the players that play here. That's important.
There you go. Ed Hervey. We were a laughing stock, and he's got some decisions to make. Decision was made by the Regina Pats. We talked about it earlier. Tanner Howe has been traded to the Calgary Hitmen for a pair of players and a pair of picks. It's had us talking about trades, and boys, get ready. We're coming to your most memorable trades in a moment. But Alan Millar, the general manager and VP of hockey operations for the Regina Pats, spoke with us earlier to tell us a little bit about how long it took for this trade to come together.
It came together fairly quickly. So, I think we started talking about Reese Hamilton late last week with Calgary. It culminated in some different discussions. We had conversations with Calgary yesterday that indicated that Hamilton was going to be moved yesterday. They had a priority on the deal we were talking about, but had made it clear to us that if we decided to pass or move on, that he was going to be moved in another deal. We collectively as a group, talked, evaluated the trade, continued to do our homework and research, and we had a deadline with Calgary at about 6:15, 6:30 last night, or they were going to move on, and we decided to move forward. We just felt that, I'll start with the draft capital, continuing to add valuable draft capital to what we're trying to build here. I think Dante states it in the release. We now have 15 picks in the first 3 rounds of the next 3 drafts. That includes 5 first-round picks, 6 second-round picks, and 5 third-round picks. That's going to give us, great flexibility and great options. When we got to a point where a player like Keith Fawcett was in the deal as an 18-year-old, had a great rookie season, set 19 goals last year, plays the game hard, skates well, softens the blow on taking Tanner Howe out of our lineup and, keeps us somewhat competitive this year. And then, when it came to Hamilton, 4th overall pick in the Bantam draft, played, was with the under-18 team in April at World Championships to get that experience, won gold on the Hlinka team, highly rated for the NHL draft, playing in next week's CHL USA Top Prospects game. Players like that don't usually come on the market at 17 years of age, and we just felt with what we're doing here and the fit in terms of our blue line moving forward, that we had to move forward and capitalize on the offer that was made and the situation with Hamilton being part of it.
So Tanner Howe to Calgary for a pair of draft picks, 2nd and 3rd rounder, as well as forward Keats Fawcett and defenseman Reese Hamilton going the other way. Again, we've been talking about trades. John, the Habs fan, says that he recalls the Russ Courtnall for John Kordic is his most memorable trade. Colson, Curtis, gentlemen, share with the class your most memorable.
You know what? The funny thing is I don't really remember a lot of trades, but for me, being like a Calgary guy, and as of late, I remember when Iginla got traded.
Okay.
That was one of them. And then as of late, I guess when they were kind of running their big playoff run and they had Matthew Tkachuk and they had Johnny Gaudreau and all that, I remember when they all got traded and I was like, oh man, those are some big names to leave.
Yeah, and you also jumped back in a time machine and said Babe Ruth earlier. Come on.
Yeah, you're
Colson?
This wasn't a trade, and it shouldn't have been, but when Chris Jones let go of Dressler, because I feel like that should have been a trade, right?
Yeah.
You would get something for him. You would get a lot for him, but it wasn't even that. They just let him go, and I grew up watching Dressler, right? He was one of my favorite players, so that one just stings.
Alan, are you sharing with the class or you're good? I didn't ask.
Yeah, sure, I'll do it. I'm split between either the Philadelphia trading away Kyle Korver for which they bought a printer.
Yeah,
and then the other one was probably be when Vince Carter got traded to the Nets.
Oh, yeah.
I was heartbroken for that.
All right.
And then I was just really heartbroken.
Boys, thank you so much for keeping us between the lines. Barney, of course, is off today. We did our best. I think we didn't wreck anything, so mission accomplished. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll go coast to coast with Arash Madani, plus new faces on the Pats bus heading to Swift Current tomorrow night. We will go live to the Regina Pats bus. We'll have that and more coming up for you on the all-new Sports Cage tomorrow afternoon. Until then, hey, check out the podcast available at sportscage.com. Again, Colson, Curtis, Alan, thanks so much for your help today. All here on 620 CKRM.